Rukus Avenue Radio.
Hello, I'm Vidya Warrior, and you're listening to Rukus Avenue Radio.
Namaste and hello, Rukus Avenue Radio listeners. This is Priyadarshini G, your radio correspondent, today for a special Diwali episode. And we're here with a very special guest for the first part, here with Vidya Warrior. And Vidya, welcome to this show. Thank you for hanging in with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so I'm going to give a little brief bio to our radio listeners about Vidya's background. So Vidya Warrior is a Kathak dancer and filmmaker. She works in documentaries related to the ancient traditions of Bharat, or, as we know it, the Indian subcontinent. At the age of 17, she moved from the US back to India to explore her cultural roots at the Isha Yoga Center for 11 years. Also known as the Dancing Warrior on YouTube, Vidya explores the true meaning behind Indian traditions and shares this essence through her videos. Through film and dance, she seeks to share the potential of all native sciences to heal humanity in every single way. Vidya, what an amazing repertoire.
Thank you.
So tell us more about your journey and your background and just where everything started.
Well, everything started in a small town called Flint, Michigan, where I grew up. I was born in India, came over here like many immigrant families, and I lived in Michigan until the age of 17. And I think just like every other Indian American growing up, many of the Indian Americans growing up in the US, it was a lot of kind of trying to enforce or trying to soak us into our culture as much as possible and not stray away from our roots and become American. Not that there's anything wrong with American, but you know, the mentality of first generation, like parents when they first come here. So we went through the works from Balavihar classes to dance classes to bhajan classes and all of that. And so that really sort of set a basis for me to kind of have a really deep space for India in my heart. But I don't think I really understood what I was doing. It was just kind of like going through. I had fun doing it. I loved the colors. I loved the exuberance of the culture. But I didn't really have an idea of what anything was.
What it really meant, like the depth of it. It was just going through the flow.
Yeah. And so that's where it started. But then when my mother took a program with Sadhguru from Isha Foundation, I think everything completely changed. And that's when our whole family, the whole household, became very... there was a kind of stillness in the air that was not there before. It was a kind of I would say like a yoga that we don't talk about, but is just kind of in the air all the time. And yoga, the essential meaning for the word yoga is union. So it's a oneness. So it's not like a oneness which is taught as a philosophy. It was just kind of there as a culture. And that really, really helped me, especially through those crucial years from like 13, 14, when you're in this kind of like, you don't know who you are. At least for me, it was a struggle and trying to fit into a culture where you don't feel like you are that, but you have to do things to fit in. And for me, I went through a lot, and I'm sure
I could relate to that too. Like growing up here, obviously my family's from New Delhi, like we spoke about. I immigrated here when I was 2.5, 3 years old, and they're like, "Oh, well, you're basically like born here." I'm like, "Yes," but same, just like as your story, my parents instilled the Indian values with me through these dance classes, through music lessons, and like I said, handing books of DVDs of the Mahabharata and Krishna to gain more wisdom and understanding of our roots. And I think you go through these questioning periods, especially as a teenager. I mean, teenage years, as we all know, they're all kind of weird, and you're going through a lot of changes. And I think for the average person, you're going through enough already. But being an Indian American, I think you went through realizing what your identity is. And in that process, what I learned is that I don't have to pick if I am Indian or whether if I am American. I think you can have multiple identities.
Yes.
Just like you come into this world as someone's daughter, someone's sibling, someone's spouse. You don't pick one of those. You are all of those. And I think that's what Hinduism teaches us, right? That you have many different forms of gods and goddesses, and they are all part of you, and you can have them in unison and not have to pick and choose.
Yeah, that's beautiful and very mature of you, like I was telling you before, like that perspective that you bring. I think the struggles that we go through don't go waste on us. I think and I hope that we become a little bit more wise, and I think you're a perfect example of that. That you can speak with such understanding of it.
Thank you.
Because of all
Thank
you've
you.
been through.
I blame the trauma. No, I'm just kidding.
Always.
No, I always had this idea that we're not an amalgamation of our achievements or the summation of our sorrows. We're more compiling of that trauma doesn't dictate us. It can either teach you or trap you. So I chose for it not to trap me and had to move forward with that. And I think it's a conscientious choice. If I sat there and just be like, well, this happened to me, the other person will have something that's way worse, in their context and their life. And it's all, subjective. And I try to take a step away from that, look at objectivity. And then for my own personal growth, watching a lot of Sadhguru's videos helped in my adult years. And I think when you're growing up in America, you have these preconceived stereotypes of what gurus are or what gurus represent in India. And just like how Diwali separates the triumph of good versus evil, there are both parts that remain in our society in every aspect. So tell us more about how your family got affiliated with Sadhguru and how that impacted you.
Oh, absolutely. This is my favorite topic because it has changed my. I don't think I had a clue of what this person was. I was all of 9 or 10 years old when we first saw Sadhguru, and at that time it was just a very intimate kind of group, very small group, and it was just meeting somebody who doesn't seem to have any kind of like rigidity or moral about him, but at the same time very focused and intense, which is very rare. Either you're like super intense and then you're like really rigid, or you're all over the place and you know what you know. So I remember even from a young age that really drew me. I didn't get it, but I was like, this is someone that I can really open up to, is just how I felt. It was very much like a father figure in my life. And then when I turned 15, I was old enough to be initiated into a meditation. And so once that started, I think I started experiencing meditation, a world which isn't about words all the time, which isn't about instruction, or at that time it was just grades and tests, and that was my world, right? And then you close your eyes and like there's nothing there. It's just, you're just silent. So for me, that really opened things up, and it made me very curious to know more, and that took me to India. And so I didn't plan to, but it ended up being 11 years, actually from the Guru Purnami, and it was exactly on a Guru Purnami that I came and that I stepped out. And I got to experience the Indian culture as an experiential thing and not as a mental thing. Just simple things like festivals or worship or a deity, a vigraham, or why we have these deities, or why we have all these gods, or why we do the things that we do. Why do we even do namaste? Why do we light a lamp? I would have heard explanations in my, I didn't tell you, in my Bala Vihar class, I was asking too many questions.
Guilty. As women, and like I said, being raised as Indian American, I had a ton of questions, and I probably drove my parents nuts because, like I said, our parents' generation, and listening to a lot of spiritual podcasts, we are coming to a realization that they were kind of inundated with the material world and survival, the basic materialistic needs that children have or society expects, was their main focus and drive, versus the grandparent generation were the one to pass down the spiritual religious stories, history actually. And we kind of had to go searching for our own answers. And I remember watching Sadhguru one time. The first time actually was through Gordon Ramsay's expedition.
Oh God, I remember that day.
And I love Gordon Ramsay, by the way. I just think he's really practical, but he gives respect where it's due. And you saw that with Sadhguru, because I think Sadhguru, speaking of practicality, he said that just because I'm spiritual doesn't mean I'm impractical. And that's why he rides around on his motorcycle. And I instantly connected to that because, again, you had these preconceived notions of spiritual leaders, gurus, who were, in this boxed kind of category of they have to be this way and they're not part of this material world. But Sadhguru is. He is both intellectually in a spiritual world, but his body and his actions throughout all the programs that he does and continues to do is a part of the material world.
Absolutely.
So let's talk more about what your influence or your knowledge from about Indian deities and Hinduism and the value of like Diwali is for you.
Sure. Another favorite topic of mine is these things. And I know right now, like if we just do a search on Google right now, it would be the most, with all due respect to whoever comes up, I'm sorry. But it tends to be put in a very, either in a very surface way that you don't really know what they're trying to say, or it's like super scholarly and you're like, whoa, like, okay.
Right, right.
But it's actually so beautiful. Like these festivals, like just for example, Diwali is coming up. It is timed, like we were just talking about, it's timed on the Amavasya, right?
Yes.
So it's not just like, hey, let's have a party and light a bunch of lamps. Yeah, we do that. But why do we light lamps on that day? There's a whole
story and there's a reason for that.
There's a reason. And you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so basically right before we were filming, guys, just FYI, behind the scenes, we were talking about, as a Bengali, we celebrate, typically Diwali is celebrated with the Lakshmi Puja at home, and we just had our own Ganesh Ji and Lakshmi Puja we did outside in the studio, and Vidya was a part of that. But traditionally, as Bengalis, we perform Kali Puja the day of Diwali. Why? Because it's the Amavasrat, which means that there is no moon outside, it's complete darkness, and therefore we light lamps and diyas to signify the welcoming of Lord Ram and his wife Sita and his brother Lakshman and the Hanuman Sena to come back to Ayodhya. So it signifies lighting the way back, to reducing the darkness from within, and it's signified by the external lighting of the lamp.
Yeah, and there's another layer, another angle to that. The same thing that about the significance. It's also about this phase of the year, from the summer solstice to the winter solstice, is when the sun's run. The way that we receive the sun's rays at that time is very different. That's why it's winter. Our days are shorter. That's how. The entire way our days are is different. And so there are things like we know about winter depression, and there's kind of a slowdown that tends to happen at the winter time. And one way that I have heard about these festivals that happen this time of year is we're trying to kind of initiate that spark from inside us. So although we don't have the same kind of volume of sunlight coming to us like in the middle of summer, right, we still want to have that heat or that agni or that
fire from within
spark, exactly. And when you light a lamp, you're invoking the agni element or the fire element, right?
Which also represents purity. Sorry to interrupt.
No, absolutely.
So that's what fire signifies in Hinduism. That's why any type of puja or any type of wedding ritual is done with fire to purify our souls from the material world, specifically.
So that purification aspect of fire is something that I saw in India and that we see in different temples. You would see, one thing is they do back in the Isha Yoga Center, they do something where they use fire to cleanse the system of impurities. It's like cleansing the aura. They actually use, like drishti.
Yes.
And it's not just in the Isha Yoga Center. We see like the grandmothers probably have some.
To take the nazar away.
Exactly.
I think all deities know what nazar is.
Yeah. So it's all about removing the impurities and kind of lighting yourself up instead of being dull or whatever. So, and then there's a whole science about why we light the lamp, and it's going to be a really long talk if we get into it. But why I wanted to bring it up is it's not just party and fun and beauty and festival.
Yeah.
That is a huge aspect of it, but this culture, we don't do anything just for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
There's always a reason. Maybe we don't always know the reason, but now in this generation, I think we really want to know the reasons for everything. And I think we have the answers. The answers do exist. It's just that we're not very good at marketing ourselves. We don't, at least, it's not like just there. If I search on Google, we're slowly getting
linear.
there.
So I feel like what I learned through my own spiritual journey, and it's something that you can't dictate or persuade other people, and it's something very personal as religion or any type of spiritual awakening happens, and should be, rightfully so. I found that our generation looks for linear acknowledgments of logic.
Very true.
So we look for the scientific process. And in my pursuit of understanding Hinduism and what it entails is you realize that cosmology is talked about. Yes. Cosmology is the study, as you know, of planetary systems and how the universe was created. We talk about evolution. So all of these topics that are not really touched upon or considered taboo in other religions are embedded within our Vedas and our holy textbooks. And the reasoning why we do specific rituals because they are scientifically inclined. And I think because of, thank God, Google. I mean, I know there's good and bad aspects of Google too, but we're slowly realizing and decoding. I mean, that's another part of the politicization of the religion, was that a lot of these ancient textbooks were because they were burned or gotten rid of, or there was not enough knowledge to pass down Sanskrit to its actual translation, or the translations were not decoded properly. There's so many different variables that play into that. But now when we go back and we're seeing a resurgence of this spiritual awakening across the globe, and I don't mean this just for people in India. We also spoke about ISKCON and how the foundation of that is not through conversion, it's through acceptance. Mm-hmm. And you accept something from the core of your heart as a way of life versus to do and not to do and fear.
Very true. And I think you made a wonderful point about things being linear and the approach that we're like, okay, why this? I think there are explanations to a certain point, but my personal experience is you have to feel it. You can't just, yes, we want explanations to inspire us to do it. Oh, if you do this, you'll get this. And it's true. It's not that it's not a carrot. It's true. But for me, I follow whatever I do in every day of my life because I feel a world of difference. How I'm constantly kind of keeping track or aware of how the moon looks, which was never there in my life before I moved to India. Oh, okay, yeah, I know that we're 3 days away from, whatever.
Right.
So I'm constantly aware of what the moon, how the moon is, what my connection is. And because I'm constantly seeing that I do different things on a full moon day, I'm like, oh yeah, I realize when it's a full moon day, I'm suddenly, like, I'm a dancer.
Yes.
I'm suddenly in a flow. It's just like something just kind of takes me over.
The creative juices get flowing.
And then when the Amavasya comes, I suddenly feel like, I kind of just feel like being silent today.
Yes.
And that observation, or that just even mentally knowing, oh yeah, the moon and me, that connection that we're it's not...
it goes back to, again, spirituality, and in Hinduism we call it Aham Brahmasmi, which means I am the universe and the universe is within me. And then if you go back to science, we are all a part of the Big Bang Theory. So whatever materials on the periodic table of elements exist within us exist in the universe as well. So that intuitive knowing, or that connection that people feel to say the weather, to say very simplistically put, right, in layman's terms, or whether you're talking about the lunar calendar, or the Gregorian calendar relies on the solar calendar, but the Hindu calendar relies on a mix of the lunar and solar. So it kind of mixes the yin and the yang. And a key thing that we participate in within our festivals is the cycle of the earth, sun, and the moon. So do you want to explain more about that, what it relates to?
Sure. So for me, I guess this whole aspect of, when I grew up, it was like, yeah, okay, the moon's there, the sun's there, the earth's there, like, yeah, whatever. But like I said, being in India and following these festivals, we were consciously kind of always seeing the moon and realizing how it looks, connecting to the earth in different ways. Why we walk barefoot in India is not because we can't afford shoes. We have wonderful traditional shoes.
That's a colonized version to demean people. Okay, we're not going to go with that narrative anymore.
Yes. It's because we're wanting to be in touch with the earth. We want to, here now they're marketing it as earthing or grounding, which is great. I'm glad.
Yes.
But we've been doing this for centuries.
Yeah, just like coconut oil, rose water, haldi doodh, golden lattes. No, we've been knowing about these things.
Exactly. So it's another problem that we have, is that we need everything to be stamped as verified by, with all due respect, a white American scientist or any American scientist.
Not anymore.
So, I mean, nobody ever came and told me you must do this because of this. But I know when I go and I walk barefoot, there's a very big difference in the way my connection with the earth and the soil and the life is, because I think that comes to the next thing that we want to talk about, which is about soil.
Yes, as we're leading into that segue. So go ahead, speak about why soil is so crucial for us. And you also spoke about being barefoot, and we're both trained classical dancers.
Yes.
And as you know, Indian classical dance is done barefoot, because they all originated from temple dances. And when you enter a temple, you must be barefoot. But also to feel the rhythm through your feet. You can dance with shoes, sure, but when your foot is connected to the ground, you feel the rhythm, you feel the beats, and you feel that energy change. And you I mean, coming from whether you're dancing Bhangra or Bharatanatyam, when you feel that beat and your foot drops the floor, it's on. So tell us why we're so connected to the ground and our soil.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Well, that reminds me of the Bhumi Pranam. Like we always start with the Bhumi Pranam.
Yes.
We're always seeking the blessings of Mother Earth before we start dancing. And it's always about kind of, like for me, when we do Tatkar and Kathak, when we're constantly doing the footwork, one of my teachers was telling me we want to feel that connection between the feet and the earth. And I think that connection is really badly missing in our Western society. And it's not, Western doesn't mean just America, whatever. I'm not racist or discriminating.
No. This is more about an awakening and kind of unlearning and relearning. So I want to clarify that. It's not good and bad.
Yeah.
For a lack of a better word, black or white. It is more of understanding that we're all gray because we're all human beings.
Yes.
And understanding what that concentration of grayness means to you.
Yeah. Wow, so well said.
We'll talk about the different shades of gray, but this is... yes, please continue with soil.
Yeah, so soil. So like you were saying with dance and like just in our daily life in India, we are always in touch with the soil. But one big thing that has recently happened, I'm sure we're aware of the Save Soil movement, which was put on by Sadhguru. It was initiated by Sadhguru, but it was something that I think was something that we all needed, but we didn't know. We all know there's climate change. We felt it a month ago, right in our face with the heat wave in California, all over the world, all kinds of disasters happening. We know it's there, but we don't. I think there's a lot of trendiness around climate change as to what's cool to talk about, but I don't know that we're all having the right dialogue or the right awareness about what we need to do. Yeah. And I think Sadhguru did a really awesome, kind of like a very simple baseline, like here's what we need to do. Because if you really look at it, soil is everything, because for us to survive here, we need to eat. And if we need to eat, it comes from the soil. It doesn't come from the supermarket. It doesn't come from a restaurant. Yeah. It comes from the soil. So that topsoil is very intelligent and very alive. If you put whatever seed you put into it, it incubates that and it comes out with something to nourish us. And without that, we couldn't live. Right. It's such a simple thing that we don't see because we're, I don't know, in another world.
We've compartmentalized. I think urban folk around the world have compartmentalized what nourishment means. And I'm not talking just about food. I'm talking about what soul nourishment means, and then working our way backwards to its roots. And again, the roots come from soil.
Yes, exactly.
So, yes, continue.
Our roots are in soil. What's happening right now is we've got the topsoil all over the world. It's not even in one particular place. It's completely, they call it soil extinction. Yeah. Because even the food that we eat, the statistic that they're constantly saying is that in the 1920s, what our grandparents had to eat in an orange, the nutrients that they got from that one orange, today, to get that same volume of nutrition, we'd have to eat 8 oranges. So right now we're at a cusp where we have to make a change, because within a few years we won't have the ability to make a change. We're just in that like final few minutes of like able to save soil. We won't be able to save soil after a certain point. And why does it matter? It's just dirt, like in the US, people say it's like dirt. It's not dirt. Soil is, it's life, it's full of life. But what the problem is right now, because of years of bad farming practices and just lack of awareness of the fact that soil needs organic material, right, on top of the soil. The topsoil needs to have a certain amount of organic material. There hasn't been a lot of awareness about that until now. Yeah. And so even now, like when you do that famous drive, the Pacific Coast, I always like to just stop and see the farms and like the strawberry patches and all this stuff.
The orange orchids and everything. Yeah.
So I went there, like very romantically, like, and the soil is like sand. It's like there's nothing in it. And then you think, so obviously for that soil to give us fruit, it takes a lot of chemical, and it takes a lot of chemical to really make that actually come out. And so what happens to the soil after you mistreat it that badly? What's happening is
it starts to die. It starts to wilt.
Yeah. So there's like large plots of farmland are just kept open under this hot sun, and that starts killing the topsoil. And that's what we see in some. And just yesterday I was looking at, of all people, Priyanka Chopra. She's in Africa. She just posted a video about Africa. And Africa, people think, oh yeah, that's Somalia, that's like, whatever. But it's not just them. It's starting there for whatever reason because of the situation there. But that is going to kind of continue everywhere. And we see that slowly happening, that the statistics are saying that just within the next 5 years, a certain segment, like billions of people, won't have access to quality drinking water.
Right.
And drinking water is also connected because the
soil.
Yeah. So if the soil is dead, it cannot retain, and it takes a lot more water to grow something out of that soil. And it's just a multi-layered thing. Climate change has many layers to it. I'm not going to claim that I'm a climate scientist by any means, but I think the little genius thing that Sadhguru has done here is he just kind of made it very simple, that the soil is where it all starts. And once we take care of that, these other issues will naturally sort of iron itself out. Is how.
I recently saw a podcast or an interview of Sadhguru's where he spoke about, everyone's trying to save the rainforest.
Yeah.
Rightfully so. We're not trying to say that is not important. Of course it is. Just like our oceans are important. Just like soil is equally as important. But he says, start from your own backyard. Start from your own. What are you growing? Do you have grass? In Los Angeles, we all know what drought-free landscaping is about.
Yeah.
So we're in Los Angeles, and we're going through a drought. But going back to where you said colonizers kind of said that, oh, it's just dirt. Why does it matter? Well, here's my response, because as Indians who are colonized, before we had great many empires, before Mughals came or before we were colonized by the Dutch, the English, et cetera, the colonizers' mentality was to call Indian skin as dirty because it resembled dirt. But they failed to realize that the cradle of civilization started with the dirt of Mesopotamia. So if we want to go back to our roots, we should also nurture where we come from and go back to giving back to our soil and realizing how important the Save Soil Project is with Sadhguru and the efforts that he's making, because there are many bureaucratic elements that involve saving the rainforest, for example, to not try to reduce forest fires, for saving the ocean. There's a lot of bureaucratic politics involved to do that. But something that we can start from our backyard, which is the Save Soil Project, is so relevant because it's something that everyone can partake in.
Yeah, so that is one thing, of course, our individual ways of living. But then I think the problem is so large scale, it needs to be like a decision that comes from the top, that there's a policy that the topsoil needs this much organic content. That is what the whole Save Soil movement is about. Of course, our individual actions are important, but it's more about, for us, and like, what do we do we know there's a problem, but how do we handle it? Because problem means you're talking about mass migration of people. If there's no food or there's no water, there's no resource to live in a particular place, we're talking about mass migrations of millions or billions of people. And whenever there has been these like famine-related wars and migration, it's always been the women and the children who suffer the most. So it's not a joke what's happening, and I think it takes a much larger action. And I think as individuals, what we need to do is start showing or expressing our need. We have to tell the politicians or the lawmakers, like, this is what we want. Because right now they're like giving us trinkets, like, okay, they want less taxes or they want this or that. Like, okay, just give it to them. I'll get voted next time.
Yeah.
We need to tell them what we want, and this isn't going to happen in 2 years. It's a long-term thing to save the soil.
Right.
So they can't say, okay, within my election term, within the 4 years,
you won't be able to solve such a large-scale problem in an election duration.
Yeah, but we need to show that this is what we want.
Right.
And that's the only way that they'll give it to us. And so for our side of it is just kind of bringing awareness about it, shouting for it, and when the time comes to actually vote, see who's actually taking steps in that direction, who's just talking.
So tell us what the average person out there like you and I can do to partake in this mission with Save Soil. How do we connect with Sadhguru's foundation? How do we contribute? How do we change what we're doing? And relearn how we can give back to?
Sure. So the whole movement is under Conscious Planet, which is very beautiful. It's very, for me, it's just ingenious how soil and consciousness are being connected so seamlessly. Because the truth is, soil is us, right? We're born out of the soil, and once our life is over, that's where we're going, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's our mother.
No matter what religion you follow, eventually you're going to end up with dirt.
That's exactly the point. It's
a universal concept.
It's universal. It just removes all the boundaries of who we are, what we are. We all need food. We're all going to go back into it. So it has this consciousness about it. It's a oneness about it. What Sadhguru's done over the last couple of months is, I don't know how much you're aware of it, but it's out of this world. Around 700 events across these continents. And he's driving on a motorcycle, and the videos you see about what he's gone through, it's just like how like somebody of this stature is sitting on a motorcycle and heat and how if he's exposed.
Yes.
And I struggled through the heat wave. I was sitting inside my apartment and he's like 10
We're
degrees.
complaining about the air conditioning.
Right. We were just complaining about the air conditioning. And it's just, I think for me it inspires me that someone is like ready to devote so much time and energy to me. Like it's for us, right?
Yes.
And that is what kind of inspires me, because it's not just about, oh, you won't get food or the food isn't whatever. It's also about someone is really giving his life to this. It really kind of inspires me to do whatever little thing I can just to raise awareness and see what steps we take toward bringing this as a policy in more. And it's actually happened in many countries. They've signed MOUs. So it's slowly happening.
Okay.
The noise that we're making is not being unheard. I mean, it's not being like left without any attention paid to it. It's happening, but it needs
More
mass,
momentum and mass
support and voice behind it. That we need to know the soil is, I think another thing is emotional, that we need to understand that the soil is us. It sounds poetic or whatever, but it's true, right? Like an emotional aspect of just kind of a connect to see that this is where my food comes from.
Yes. I remember doing that in kindergarten. I think there was a mass scale program that was instilled in elementary schools around kindergarten to 5th grade, where we had gardening as a recreational aspect of the day.
Right.
So it was either once a week or like every couple of days, everybody would go outside with the school garden.
Yeah.
And we would plant flowers or tomatoes or anything, and we would watch it grow. And then being instilled at a young age, how important that is to nurture the soil and everything. So I think there needs to be a resurgence of that as an adult, because we also learned that sharing is caring as kids, but somehow we forgot as adults. So we need a kind of refresher. So tell our fans, as we wrap this up, where they can find more information about the Isha Center, about the Save Soil Project, as well as your social media handles.
Sure. So for the Save Soil, Conscious Planet is the handle on Instagram, and they're also active on YouTube. They are active. All kinds of influencers are stepping up, putting their voice out there, because it's all about it's more voices that's needed. So I would follow Conscious Planet, and there's also a way to get involved. There's called Earth Buddy. So the Earth Buddy, part of that is also kind of giving you the tools, the research. You don't have to sit and research on your own necessarily. You have the information right there in your hands, and you can put it out in whatever way is natural for you. We have people singing and dancing and videos and all kinds of whatever's natural. It's just about sharing the message, and this message is so universal that anyone can literally. We have kids doing it. It's just, there's a lot of beautiful ways that you can be a part of it.
Amazing. We look forward to connecting with the Save Soil, with Sadhguru's Isha Foundation, and then how do our fans connect with you if they want to follow what you're doing? Because Vidya, we talked about what her contributions are in terms of the environment and Save Soil, but she's actually a filmmaker, and we talked about her classical dancing background in Kathak. But where can fans follow you and see what you're doing with filmmaking?
Oh, yep. So on Instagram, The Dancing Warrior, Warrier, and on YouTube as well. I again, about the Indian culture, I try to create little pieces of videos that kind of bring more clarity. So I try to share whatever I have experienced, whatever I research, or whatever I find out, and present that in hopefully a relatable and an interesting way.
Awesome. All right. So thank you so much, Vidya, for gracing us with your knowledge, first and foremost, and the advocacy that you show for a safe soil. And I'm sure all of our listeners are very keen to see what part they can do to change and try to at least minimize or reverse certain aspects of the damage we've done to our environment. So anyway, Rukus Ave Radio listeners, this is your radio correspondent, Priyadarshini G with Vidya. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned to catch part 2 of our Diwali Special. Until next time.
Rukus Avenue Radio.